Welcome everyone, this is Sophie Wisburn of the Doing Business and Doing Good Summit. How can you use your business to create a better world? I'm very happy to present to you today Paul Polman, the CEO of Unilever. Thanks a lot Paul for your time and to discuss how business leaders can be a force for good. You are the leader in building a long-term value model. You have successfully built a solid base of responsible shareholders. I read 70% of the shareholders have held their shares for more than 7 years. Could you share how you did this? How did you build this long-term value model for Unilever to also help the other CEOs and business leaders out there? What steps to take to get there and what strategies to adopt?
Yeah, so what we found was if you want a longer-term business model, if you abolish quarterly reporting and if you abolish guidance like we did, then actually your communication becomes also more long-term. We only communicate twice a year and basically one major event. So we don't talk about Christmas here or Ramadan there or the weather. We talk long-term. And it is increasingly proven that companies that communicate long-term also attract more long-term shareholders. Then the second thing you have to do is you have an enormous shareholder base and with many different opinions out there. And often with the short tenures and the pressures of the business, people dance to the pipes of the shareholders who shout the loudest. You have to actively go out there and seek the right shareholders. It's not that easy, but most shareholders want these longer term sustainable models. Most of the money that is invested are institutional investors that have pension liabilities that are longer term. So you'll find many friends. Then you have to learn how to communicate. Many CEOs feel uncomfortable about that. You have to obviously link it to the business. If you can't link it to the business, it's difficult for investors to understand. They want to know the materiality, they want to compare, they want to know how you measure things. So you have to work on that. Now there are organizations out there like the World Business Council, the UN Global Compact and others, that the GRI, that have done quite a lot of things that can provide some guidance for companies in that. And then obviously at the end of the day you have to produce results. The more you produce results, the more you are obviously getting space to put these models out there. And in Unilever and actually increasingly globally, we can show you that if you run these longer term, more sustainable models, you most likely will also be more successful in your business. In the case of Unilever, we've had a 218% shareholder return over the last 9 years. At times when interest rates are zero, basically that's quite a good return. And we've been consistently in the top tercile of our investor group, with a cumulative growth rate over that period at twice the market level. So increasingly we can show you that it actually does make good business sense. And ultimately it's obviously the results that gives you that space to do a little bit more.
Yeah, you obviously built a business case for a long-term value model very successfully. And there was a historic, so to say, moment last year with Kraft Heinz. Do you believe you have successfully ensured your shareholders to stay convinced that sustainability and sustainable growth is the way to go?
Well, what we found overwhelmingly, our shareholders were with us, and it was only 1.5 days that someone made an offer, which I think is possible in a democracy. But you have here fundamentally different models. One is focused on serving the billions of people and a long-term compounded growth model, and one is focused on serving a few billionaires with a short-term investor return model. And obviously there is an increasing group of investors with too much money out there, interest rates being zero, the uncertainties of the longer term, that actually prefer the immediate shorter term returns. So you have these tensions, and you need to be sure that when you run these business models and come across these other business models that are out there, that you can keep enough shareholders on board. I don't know how it would have finished in Unilever. I got a lot of encouragement from our current shareholder base, and in fact our shareholder return has been significantly higher than this other company that you mentioned. So our shareholders are convinced that as long as we have these results, we have the right management there, we continue to execute against our strategy, that is the best option. £1 invested in Unilever in 1986 is worth £80 now. £1 invested in the stock market, the AEX or the Fuji, is £17 now, £80, £17. So undoubtedly there are good years and less good years in a history of Unilever, but all in all it has been a tremendously compounded value creation story. And we're doing that at the same time as we create jobs, as we work on inclusion. We fight for women and women's rights. We help less people go to bed hungry. We teach people hand washing, 480 million, nearly 500 million, so that they don't die before the age of 5. So we really are a model that puts itself to the service of society, and that's really making the Sustainable Development Goals come alive. In the work that we've done on the Sustainable Development Goals, we found that opportunity to be about $12 trillion. So we are at a point in humanity where by not acting, we actually incur higher costs than acting. And increasingly more and more businesses are starting to understand that. The cost of inaction being higher than the cost of action is actually a good galvanizer to do something. We spent in this world about 9% of the global GDP on wars and conflict prevention. And every day there's more as you open your newspapers or you watch the CNNs of this world. It only costs about 3 to 4% of GDP to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. And the cost of climate change is already 5%, of conflict prevention 9%, and the list goes on. So I think we're getting to a point that we should rise to that challenge and invest behind this. Seize this opportunity of $12 trillion, which for every business would be an enormous opportunity, and create this better world where everybody can participate. The other phenomena that has happened which business should be aware of is the internet has provided an enormous level of transparency. Yesterday it was Wells Fargo, the day before it was Volkswagen, before that it was the manipulation of LIBOR or foreign exchange rates. Then someone started to get textiles on the cheap and a factory in Rana Plaza collapsed, where 1,050 women innocently lost their lives, earning 11 cents per hour, by the way. You can't get closer to modern day slavery. So anything that now happens in any part of the world, how people are being treated, how products are being produced, what resources are being squandered, is now visible for the whole world in a nanosecond. So there ain't no place to hide, as they say. This is the age of transparency. But it's an enormous opportunity for companies to seize this, and that's really what we're trying to say. And increasingly, that is you're able to put this in numbers and hard facts to get people on board.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all the challenges can be out there via internet, but also all the good things and the good examples can inspire others more quickly. All right. And in terms of the long-term value model, what are you continuously doing to preserve this model?
Yeah, well, we put out the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. We're well on the way to implementing that. That plan called for reaching 1 billion people and improving their health and well-being, decoupling our growth from environmental impact, increasing our overall social impact, creating 5 million jobs for women in our value chain, 5 million smallholder farmer job creation, which will be a big challenge. So we have some targets out there, and we publish that in fact on our website. But the reality is the world is changing, and it continues to change. So we will increasingly, I think, need to focus on social compliance in the value chain. The fourth industrial revolution, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, robotics, is going to drastically change the job market at a time that we already have 190 million people unemployed. We need to create 40 million jobs a year. We have 3.5 billion people living in marginal jobs, 2 billion more people, 3 billion more people coming into this world. We have to look at this quite differently and make these models work more inclusively. And I think there will be more pressure on that. There will be more pressure on how companies behave in their value chain. We're starting to see that already. So fortunately, we're blessed again with the Sustainable Development Goals, but also with frameworks like the Ruggie framework. And Unilever will be certainly focused on that quite a lot. Then the second thing we'll be focused on, obviously, is there is so much that we can do alone, but some things we simply can't do alone, and we need to then work in these partnerships. A good example is the deforestation. We've put coalitions together to get countries like Malaysia or Indonesia or others out of the deforestation, and to get commitments from the whole industry to move in 2020 to sustainably sourced soy, paper, pulp, beef, palm oil. And we need to be sure that we continue with these broader transformative efforts to get the world with us. And then there are some other efforts around moving the markets to the longer term. We've created a coalition which is called Focusing Capital on the Long Term, or Inclusive Capitalism. We now have some of the major investors behind that, Fidelity, BlackRock, State Street, and others. Hopefully we can start to see some movement in the financial market there as well, which I think is a big impediment for many companies now to do the right thing.
How should companies deal with sustainable investments whilst their previous investment have not yet been depreciated?
Yeah, well, what we talk about here is a long-term plan. It's not that we have to boil the ocean or eat the elephant in one bite or boil the ocean in 2 minutes. So you need to plan these things and you have to have a longer-term strategy. A good example of that would be, let's say for Unilever, the ice cream cabinets. They normally last about 10 years. We moved the industry, the Nestle's, the Cokes, the Pepsis, we moved all these cabinets to natural refrigerants, which is about 2 to 3% of global warming. So it's substantial. But it's a 10-year plan because these machines have a 10-year life plan. So plan it properly. We're moving all of our factories now to green energy. There, for example, usually the contracts are shorter. They're 1 or 2 year contracts. When these contracts expire, you could actually move today. All the decisions we've made to move quite rapidly to green energy have a payout of less than 3 years. There are companies out there now that are willing to put the capital in, so you don't have to do anything. All you get is the green energy and a lower rate. So many of the things can be done. We've moved our factories to waste-free, so no waste to landfill, which I find quite normal, and think about it slightly differently. That took us about 2 to 3 years to put in place. Now these factories are run better, people are more motivated, costs are lower, service levels are better. So make a proper plan behind all of that. When you open a new building, be sure it's LEED qualified. Put solar panels on your roof. We just opened a new office in Paris the other day, and it actually gives energy, which is a tremendous thing. It gives energy to the system, it gives energy to the people. These things are often closely related. So as you make these plans, try to make a game plan that is 3 to 5 years out. That's the most important thing you can do.
Yes. What would be your tips for all the business leaders listening to embrace, to be a force for good in their company or wherever they work?
Well, be purpose driven and find out what your purpose is. Your life will be a lot better. The moment you discover it's not about yourself, you'll be a great leader. Work in partnership. Many of these challenges cannot be done alone. The African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And then be highly aware of the issues that are out there. Engage on these issues, and last but not least, operate with a high sense of humanity and humility. We're here, we're lucky that we're here. We're here to serve others. It's not about ourselves.
It's here to, we are here to serve the world.
That's what it boils down to.
You are doing amazing work.
No, it's okay. We all do.
Yes.
As I say, we all have the 24 hours that are the same, and we choose how we live it.
Yes, exactly.
It was Benjamin Franklin who said, "You may delay, but time will not, and lost time will never be found again." And that's the situation we're finding ourselves in. So if we can excite some of your listeners to move faster, to more heroic action, you'll do the next generation and the ones after that a big favor. Okay,
I hope everyone listens very well to all this wisdom you have shared. Okay. Thanks so much, Paul, for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.